Good stuff. Okay, hi guys, welcome to the Gin and Tonic Show. On this wonderful Saturday, Atheismo couldn't make it back on time because he went off to do what his atheist morality whispered him to do, and that is assassinate Syria's Bashar al-Assad. So we're still waiting for him to get back, but let's see what happens next week or next show. So he asked me to hold the fort until he gets back, so please bear with me. I need to say that we are a public access show and everything said here is indeed public and not private at all. It is so public that we will make it even more public by uploading it to YouTube. We're still looking if we can get the click to call banner working, but until that is sorted out, start Skype, send a contact request to the Gin and Tonic Show, tell me what you would like to talk about, and I'll pull you in if I'm able to sort this out. Please do not call and try to send off multiple requests. So today, we had a bit of a confusion because we thought that we're going to have a guest who was on in February already and who could not really convince us, and we were going to give him a second chance. But it is not going to be today. It is going to be hopefully in 2 weeks' time, inshallah. So today, in a world where Muslims publicly shoot a woman in Afghanistan, hundreds are killed in Syria by a tyrant who refuses to accept what his people want, where people who doubt the existence of a supernatural being are punished the same way as frauds and thieves and even executed for it, and where Islamist extremism reigns, and what you see in the headlines ahead of the Olympic Games, wow. So what we try and provide is an objective, balanced information package instead of sensationalism. So to kick us off, let's take a look at some technology and have the Rationalizer tell us what the new developments are on the Higgs boson front.
Well, I remember last time on the show there was a bit of joking around about how people are now going to retrofit the discovery of the Higgs boson into the Quran and explain how the Quran predicted it in advance. Slightly ironically, the Higgs boson was actually predicted by a Muslim physicist. His name was Muhammad Abdus Salam. In 1960 to 1974, he was the government's science advisor for Pakistan. He helped with Pakistan's nuclear program. And in 1979, he was awarded the Nobel Prize for his work on the electroweak unification theory. Now, he and another physicist called Stephen Weinberg independently predicted the existence of a subatomic particle which we now know as the Higgs. But in 1974, the Pakistani government ruled that the Ahmadiyya denomination of Islam was an illegal denomination. It wasn't valid because they believed that a guy called Ghulam Ahmad, who died in 1908, was another prophet. And of course, Muhammad was the last prophet. So the Pakistani government said that this is an illegal denomination. According to the Guardian newspaper in the UK, Pakistani passport applicants, when they apply for their passport, they must sign a section saying that the founder of the Ahmadi sect denomination was an imposter and that all of his followers are non-Muslims. It's illegal for them to declare their faith publicly. They're not allowed to call people to prayer. And if they do, they can apparently be punished with prison or death. So this guy's left Pakistan in 1974. It helped them with their nuclear program. And even in 1998, after they did their nuclear tests in Pakistan, the Pakistani country had commemorative stamps. And one of them was, it was called Scientists of Pakistan. And Muhammad Abdus Salam, his photograph appeared on one of these stamps. Now, at his acceptance speech for his Nobel Prize, he quoted 2 verses from the Quran, and it was chapter 67, verses 3 to 4. Thou seest not in the creation of the All-Merciful any imperfection. Return thy gaze. Seest thou any fissure? Whatever That's a loose translation, I think. Then return thy gaze again and again. Thy gaze come back to thee, dazzled. So this guy obviously believed he was a Muslim. He left Pakistan. According to Mr. Hoodboy, who I believe Stopspamming is familiar with, he said that the way he's been treated as a tragedy, he went from someone who was revered in Pakistan as a national celebrity to someone who could not set foot there. If he came, he would be insulted or could be hurt or even killed. According to The Guardian, again, his name's been struck from textbooks because he belonged to this other denomination. When he died, his remains were taken to Pakistan and buried next to his parents. And on his grave, it was written, in 1979, became the first Muslim Nobel laureate for his work in physics. But because of his adherence to the Ahmadiyya Muslim sect, the word Muslim was later erased by the orders of a local magistrate. So his grave now just says, in 1979, became the first Nobel laureate for physics. So I thought the irony was a bit funny there that after joking of finding Higgs boson prediction in the Quran, it actually turns out that one of the first people that predicted the existence of the Higgs was in fact a Muslim. But really a big shame that the Pakistani country, the government of Pakistan, has basically turned their back on him, and it seems like they're pretending he never existed.
That's the way to go, and this is what Professor Hoodboy was very, very sorry to hear, because he explained to me that even though he disagreed on some points with him intellectually or academically, he still valued him as a person. And he said it's actually, it's appalling how he was treated by his fellow Muslims. Yes, that is reality. Any other comments on this?
Just as a clarification with Amir Nadir Ahmad, he wasn't supposed to be on today. We'd agreed that he was going to be on the 28th. It's not that Nadir has let us down or anything. There was just a confusion between us. And I think that the click to call button at the top of the screen should be working. So if anyone wants to click it and test it and call in, that would be good, because I'd like to see it work.
All right, we have one person on who wants to discuss a topic with us. So it's Big Lundy. So Big Lundy is online. Welcome, Big Lundy. Can you hear anything? Hello, Big Lundy.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yep, you're going strong. What can we do for you?
So, in preparation for something that we're doing tomorrow on the Trolling with Logic show, we're interviewing the Arab atheists, and I know they deal with Muslims a lot more than Christians over there. So I started trying to look up some stuff on Islam because I'm not very familiar with the whole thing. And I started to get into regular conversation with a Muslim, and he really just started to confuse me on some of the things that he said. And I was wondering if you guys could clarify some things. One of the most weirdest things about him is that he doesn't believe that anyone can be an atheist.
Yes, this is the common belief with Muslims, that everybody is born a Muslim, and if you don't do anything, you will stay a Muslim.
I think this is probably a little bit of a spin-off from Muhammad's days, where you had Muhammad in this these surroundings of people of all different religions, and he came forward saying, "I am a messenger from God," and rather than the Jewish people, especially the rabbis, accepting him and saying, yes, you know a lot about this religion, you are clearly a prophet, they mocked him and said, "You're just a fake. You've made a mistake. How can this be true?" And then Muhammad would give them an answer. He'd make stuff up. And what would happen is, if you can imagine being the leader of this, at the time, small group of people, what I would say a small cult, now you've got to explain to these people, God has sent me to give this message to everyone, yet why is it that all of the people that know anything about religion are saying that I'm a fake? These people would probably be a little bit confused. So what you would do is say, they're covering up the truth. Really, they believe it, but they don't want to accept it as true. They know it, yet they cover it up, which is probably why he called them kuffars, the ones who cover up the truth. And I think there's probably a number of places in the Quran that say something like, they cover up what they know, and so on and so on. And I think that's probably his way of reassuring his cult followers, look, I really am. And it's not that they disbelieve it, it's that they know it, yet try to deny it because of their own selfish desires. And I think it goes, as you read the Quran and you get these kind of messages out of it, rather than it only being about the Jewish people who he accused of covering it up, it's kind of extrapolated out onto everyone else who says this isn't true, and it becomes an accusation against everyone who says, I don't believe in Islam or I don't believe in God. And because they've got such a conviction that this is true, and the Quran talks about covering up, they think, well, really they believe in it, but they're so engrossed in their material life that they cover up their true feelings and pretend that it's not real. That's my opinion.
Isn't that sort of like a biblical offshoot, though? Because I'm pretty sure Christianity has pretty much the same feel. Like, you know that God exists, you just don't want to believe.
Yes, there are a lot of parallels. Kling, would you want to add?
Sure, yeah. In fact, let me just read a quote here that basically concerns this phenomenon, or rather this doctrine. It's an actual proper doctrine in Islam. It's called Din al-Fitra. And allow me to read this quote, which basically explains the whole thing. Din al-Fitra in theology is comparable to the Augustinian religio-naturalist, which is God's gift through creation to all human beings. In this connection, the Prophet is reported to have said, quote, every child is born in the Fitra. It is his parents who make him a Jew or a Christian or a Parsi, or Zoroastrian. And that's in Sahih Muslim and also in Sahih al-Bukhari. The word Fitra signifies the original state of things and serves as a universal recognition of God's sovereignty before people become obligated to their specific deen, paths of conduct brought by the prophets. So essentially everyone is born a Muslim, and then it's their parents that corrupts them to become any other ideology.
Which is, of course, why they call people reverts rather than converts, and that really drives me crazy.
I mean, it sort of reminds me of the whole idea of deconversion into atheism. You know, I don't know, that seems extremely strange to me, because both my parents were Christians. I was born a Christian. I was raised a Christian, and then I became an atheist. I would think that me rejecting essentially the same God that the Muslims worship would be me rejecting, Allah. I don't know why it's impossible for me to do so. That doesn't seem to make any sense to me.
Sorry, say that again. What doesn't make sense? What makes you reject Allah?
Well, I reject the whole God concept in the first place because of many reasons. Most importantly, problem of evil, problem of non-belief, just certain logical problems that are inconsistent with the idea of a God. Right. And so I start to reject the idea that a God exists. And I tell him, I'm like, I was raised a Christian. I ended up becoming an atheist. So how can I not become an atheist? Why is it impossible for me to become a non-believer?
Because the argument always goes, even if you believe, you think that you are an atheist, there still is this almighty God out there who is looking after you, and you are still living in a God-run world, but you just don't know about it.
That seems viciously circular to me.
Absolutely it is. The other thing that you need to appreciate here is that Allah is not a name, it's the same name as God. So it's always the same God that they're talking about, which is the funny thing, because on the one hand they say there is only one God, and the other God that claims to be a God, he had a son, so he cannot be a God. So this is also a little bit circular.
I mean, the whole thing rings to me of presuppositional apologetics. Like, you have to presuppose God exists, or you can't use logic, you can't use math, you can't think unless a God exists. And that's, wow.
Well,
Yes.
it's difficult to understand that you don't believe in God because, I mean, look at the camel. You know?
Look, you can't not. Look at the gracefulness of the camel.
You know, the argument used again and again in the Quran is, look at this. Look at the sky, how it rains and makes things grow. And then it goes dry and it's dead. But it rains and then it comes alive again. You know, how obvious is it that there's a God? Come on. That could never happen without a God. And, you know, camels, they're just so brilliant that, you know, only a God could have invented a camel. You know, look at all these things, and it constantly appealing to your intuition. And that's basically what it does. It says, do they not see? You know, do they think this came from nothing? Obviously, a God has created all of this. And I just assume that people just look around and probably some of them look at the awe of the universe and transpose that onto a kind of intelligent being and think, saying you don't believe in God is a little bit like saying, I don't believe in the universe.
That's strangely parallel to a lot of Christian arguments I've seen. Look at the trees and look at the clouds, and then just ask yourself, how did that get there? Oh, Jesus.
Yeah.
That actually brings me into my other question. I brought up to the guy that I've been talking to the whole Alexander On over in Indonesia, who's been arrested for blasphemy laws, and he's being put into jail for, I think, 2.5 years because he asked for evidence of God on Facebook. And I asked him, I'm like, well, what do you think about this? And he said, that seems extremely reasonable to me. I said, why? He goes, well, because you being an atheist is infringing on my right to be a Muslim. I said, well, why? I don't understand how that makes any sense.
Well, this is the way that, okay, you need to appreciate something. The people, it's not really their fault. They have been, I don't know, indoctrinated. They have been brainwashed. All their lives they have been told the number one thing is that there is only one God, and Muhammad is the guy who is conveying his message. So these are the things that you are being fed, spoon-fed, every single day of your life. You watch your parents praying. You watch the whole ritualistic, the constraints that you have. They don't realize anymore that 4/5 of the planet is eating pork, and this 4/5 of the planet is not dying out, which they should do if the reasoning of the Muslims and the Jews is correct, that pigs are bad for you. So it doesn't work. None of this works. So you can't use reason. You have to use only the emotional aspect, and there it's very difficult. You cannot rationalize with them. You need to appreciate that. But
Jesus.
you mentioned something about the show tomorrow. I would like to mention, because Velsa told me this, that tomorrow is going to be English, not only in Arabic. So if anybody wants to take a peek what they do, tomorrow is a good time, a good day to do it.
Where's that? Is that on Blog TV?
Yes.
And what's the name of the channel?
I will have to put that up. I will have to ask Velsa to give me the real location of this.
The location, I'm a part of the show, so I can just.
Oh, okay, great. Then plug it. Yeah.
Trolling with Logic is the name of the channel on Blog TV. All one word. And I have, I think, one more question, and I tried originally to contact Klingschor about this, but I think we have extremely weird time zone differences, so it's hard to get a conversation going. But I wanted to ask, what are the apologetics towards Muhammad not in fact being a pedophile? Because every time that's brought up, it's usually, oh no, he's not. You just haven't read right. You know, I don't.
The apologetics is typically just denialism and sophistry. Denialism in that all the hadiths that say that Aisha bint Abu Bakr was 9 years old when Muhammad consummated her, the denialism is that they're all fake or that don't exist. And the sophistry comes in when they try to extrapolate from various discrepant hadith chronologies that Aisha was 16 or 19 or 20 when Muhammad consummated her. And it's utterly ridiculous. Every single hadith that ever mentions Aisha's name says that she was 9 years old. Ooh, pardon my voice. So you've got 4 hadiths in Sahih al-Bukhari, 3 hadiths in Sahih Muslim, 2 hadiths in Sunan Abu Dawud, 2 hadiths in Sunan al-Nasai, 2 hadiths in Sunan Ibn Majah, several hadiths in the Sirat al-Rasulullah of Ibn Hisham, and several hadiths in the Tarikh of At-Tabari. And all of them agree that Aisha was 9 years old at the time of her consummation.
The one I usually hear is that 9 years old back then was actually the time in which a girl would be. I suppose they
would start menstruating.
Yes.
Absolute nonsense. Every single if you look across ancient cultures because we don't have any records from Arabia, we have very few records, and those records we do have are from 2 centuries later, and most of them were actually from Iraq. The people telling these, reciting hadiths are actually living in Iraq and Syria. In any case, if you look at historical records from the ancient Greeks, the ancient Egyptians, the Romans, the Indians, even China, medieval Europe, all across the spectrum, the historical record shows that the average age of menarche and the commencement of puberty occurred between the ages for women between the ages of 12 and 14. So the average was about 13, which is a long shot from 9. That's about a 4-year difference. And that's only the beginning of menarche, right? The menarche is the beginning of puberty, so you've still got the process of puberty before they're fully mature. So it's absolutely ridiculous for people to try and say that she was mature, especially when we look at the hadiths themselves, because the hadiths are very clear. They talk about how she was playing on a swing on the day of her marriage with her friends, and that when her mother called to her, she ran and that she was breathing hard. So she'd obviously been doing a lot of, energetic play for her to be, breathing hard, and she had to wait a pause to catch her breath. And once she caught her breath, her mother wiped her face. So clearly she was dirty. We can derive from the fact that her mother wiped her face and cleaned her off. And Aisha had absolutely no idea what was going on. She had no idea that she was getting married on that day. And all of this is indicative, and she was surprised to see Muhammad. She was absolutely surprised to see Muhammad. All of this is extremely indicative of a child.
Yeah,
it's very clear.
Playing with dolls and cushions and all.
Yeah, I forgot to mention, she continued to play with dolls with Muhammad after their marriage was consummated.
And the whole thing I don't actually understand, because we're talking about people in the 7th century. We're talking about people who had slaves, who had several wives. The whole lifestyle was completely different. If you go and tell a Muslim on a forum, for example, that his beloved Muhammad was actually trading in slaves, he was a trader and he was selling slaves, they throw you out because they can't handle the truth. So there's a lot of things that they are very, very I don't know, they have a complex about it. It's an inferiority complex. And I don't understand that they don't simply stand up and say, well, it was a different era. In those days it was fine. And Muhammad was only doing what the other people were doing. And on top of that, he was a prophet. This is what I would do. Instead of trying to apologize for things and instead of trying to make things up and go and kill everybody that says the opposite, it's I don't know, it's losing it's making you incredible. It's funny.
The thing is, though, if they did that, it would lose them the credibility, because the claim is Muhammad's the last prophet. He is the perfect example for all mankind until the day of judgment. So that's it. You can't say, he isn't an example to be followed. He was just doing what was typical. Things have changed now.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah.
His example was the example forever. So you can't. So to say, oh, that was then, this is now. Then basically you're ignoring that tenet, aren't you?
It's also true. Yes.
Another thing as well is what we must remember is, when we talk about puberty, Islamic puberty isn't the same as Western puberty, which is why I try to call it maturity.
Yeah, that's a much better term. Because
puberty implies pubic hair or some other Western ideas, whereas in Islamic maturity, a girl only need be older than the age of 9, have a dream of a sexual nature, and when she woke up, to have some kind of sexual lubricant coming from a vagina. And if this happens, then she's considered to be mature enough for sex.
All right. I apologize for taking too much time on your show, but the whole mentioning of Aisha actually did raise another question in my head. I heard this a while ago, but this is all just hearsay, so I don't know how valid it is. Is it true that there's parts in the history of Muhammad that at times Aisha would start to question whether or not he's really a prophet, and she started to think, I think you're making this all up?
I have read this, yes, but I wouldn't be able to tell you now where this was.
Yeah, I don't. I've read something, and it said something like, Allah is always very quick to satisfy your desires, or something like that. Basically, she was saying, considering Allah's in charge, he seems to be doing a lot of what you want.
Okay, do you remember where this was? Is this a Sahih?
No, it's a Hadith. I don't remember the details on that. I just remember reading it and having a chuckle and thinking to myself, yeah, I was thinking that as well.
Catherine?
I was going to say the same thing. Like, I think it was referring to how Muhammad wanted to have sex with one of his slaves, and his wife got upset. And, then Muhammad actually said to his wife that he's not going to have sex with his slaves. Then, magic, revelation, it's all cool. That's when Aisha said, that's when Aisha said, like Allah seems to really like Muhammad, Yeah,
it is amazing. Anything else, Big Lundy?
Hang on the subject of Aisha as well. You're asking how people deny it. Yes, some people say she was much older. Some people say these were lies that were made up. Other people say, yes, it's fine to have sex with young girls. Sorry, very young women. And, there's various things. But, of course, usually the people that say it's okay to have sex with a 9-year-old usually say, but I wouldn't do it. There's various ways that people deal with it. The one that sticks in my mind is the people that say that this isn't true. These were lies that were made up after the fact. But I think really that exposes the fatal flaw with the entire faith and prophet system. Because if you're going to bring this prophet with a message, and one of the important things, not only are the words spoken important, but the actions that they do are important. if people are able to make up lies about this person after the fact, and other people are going to believe those lies, then what you'll get is a situation where people are doing things that this supreme entity doesn't want them to do, but they believe that the supreme entity has told them to do it. It's an entirely rubbish system because it's so very easily corruptible. And whenever people say that's lies that have been made up, it always raises the question in me, how do you know which parts are lies and which parts are true?
Exactly, yes. Do you also get these questions, the statements, these are not true Muslims, if they make up anything? Do you also get that you get the impression there actually are only two Muslims, and that is the caller and Muhammad, or there's only two Christians, the caller that you're with and Jesus, that everybody else is different?
What I find is
this was a question to Big Lundy.
Oh, to me. I'm sorry. Yes, actually, I do get that a lot. Because it seems recently I just got into a debate in the comment section of a deconversion story that was put up by a guy named Evidence. Fantastic series of videos. I thought it was great, and he made it very intricate to make it as convincing as possible. Like, this was a real deconversion. I was a true fundamentalist. I really believed in the Bible. I was a real Christian, and I'm telling you, this is what caused me to become an atheist. And that was his whole deal. And some guy left comments on every single different video that he put up. And every single one of them was, I don't think that you were a real Christian because you're not following the biblical Christianity. And I would go, well, I mean, what does he need to do? I mean, in the beginning video, he said that he spoke in tongues, that he was a part of the Royal Rangers, who are a Christian group, that he was raised as a Baptist, and he had everything that would qualify as being a Christian. But apparently, if he doesn't say everything exactly as you think it should be said via the Bible, then he wasn't a real Christian when he deconverted. And that really frustrates me, especially when he says something like, well, I don't like when people like Gerald Schroeder try to extrapolate the wording in the Genesis to make it long to accommodate science. No, the Bible's right. Science has to accommodate the Bible. And I'm like, well, that's not really honest, is it? Because you're presupposing the Bible first. You're not only that, but you're presupposing biblical literalism first. And you're saying you have to follow it this particular way, and any information that runs contrary to that, you're just supposed to reject. This guy didn't reject it, so he wasn't a real Christian. So it's impossible for a real Christian to be deconverted in this guy's eyes.
Exactly.
And that's frustrating.
Yeah. If anybody wants to add their opinion, please do us a favor and try the click to call in the banner on the top right-hand corner. I'm a skeptic. Rationalizer says it works. Why doesn't somebody go and try it? Klingschor, you wanted to add?
It looks like
yes. I just wanted to mention the highly, highly irritating phenomenon that I find with let's say 99% of all the Muslims, and I'm sure this extrapolates to Christians too, but I only have experience with Muslims these days. Nearly every single goddamn Muslim I talk to, they love to pretend that their version of Islam is the version that most Muslims follow. And it's just not true. It's just not true. When I talk to them, it's like, there are no differences between the madhabs. They're pretty much all exactly the same. Oh yeah, apart from the fact that they all have different frickin' punishments for every single thing, and they have different ways to pray and different ways to do your frickin' ablutions and different conducts and everything. And different concepts. But yeah, apart from that, they're all exactly the same. Like, it's just so irritating. I don't understand what this, I don't know what logical fallacy you call this, what this phenomenon is called. But they just like to pretend that their own personal version of Islam extrapolates to the Islam, and that there are no sects, there are no differences, there is only one true Islam. Don't call me a Salafi, don't call me a Hanafi, I am only are Muslim, and they're not. And I don't understand why they have to pretend that, first of all, that there is only one kind of Islam, that is their Islam. It's just this highly, it's a short-sighted, ignorant, self-centered kind of view. Have any of you guys ever come across this?
Well, I suppose that's because, really, because God is in your mind, and you believe that God is reasonable and perfect, really your God has got to conform to your views of what's reasonable and perfect, at least to a significant degree. So if you believe that something is unreasonable, it's very likely that your God believes that it's unreasonable. Of course, if there's no wriggle room at all, if your doctrine explicitly states something and you disagree with it, then of course you've got to put that issue on the back of your mind on your little shelf to deal with later, in the hope that one day it will all become clear. You're just failing to understand how it's moral when it appears so immoral. But I think for the most part, where there's wriggle room, people will generally state that God believes what they believe because that's what they think is moral, and they believe that their God is moral.
It's kind of explained a little bit better in Christianity because they're guided by what's known as the Holy Spirit, part of the Trinity, where they say the Holy Spirit is leading me to believe these things, and that's what God wants me to believe, so that's what I'm going to believe. What blows my mind is when they think that it leads them to believe in biblical literalism, which is really a very recent interpretation of the Bible. In fact, I think in the year 400 there were church fathers saying you shouldn't take this literally. Genesis is not meant to be a literal passage. Don't do that. And that was literally a command by the church fathers. And then like 120 years ago, as a sort of a reactionary belief system towards growing secularity, people decided we're going to get back to the fundamentals, and they wanted to read everything literally, and that's what caused that whole thing to even come up in the first place. And so I say, why are you clinging on to this fairly recent phenomena as if it's been the truth for hundreds of years?
Well, of course that makes perfect sense, doesn't it? If you're going to write a book of truth, the very first chapter you write should be a chapter on what didn't really happen. In the beginning, this happened. But don't take it literally, because it didn't.
I think most church fathers, I think Papias, Martyr, they would say that any of the beginning passages, the Old Testament in particular, was actually around prior to the New Testament. It was just the Torah. And they would probably say that this was meant more as a bit of poetry to understand your place in the world when it comes to God's creation, less than an actual account of what actually happened.
Yeah, it does a very poor job, though, of portraying the world's place in the universe, doesn't it? The universe and the earth were one thing, and then the universe was lifted up from the earth. It was lifted up from the water, which would later form the oceans. Whether or not it's a way of telling mankind, look at your place in the scheme of everything, it really was a very, very poor way of portraying the Earth's true position in the magnitude of the universe.
Okay, Biglandi, does that help you?
That does help me.
Okay, great. So I'll definitely be popping in tomorrow to see what you guys do. I'll be trolling you a bit.
Is there
fantastic.
Klingschor, do you recall? I've got this vague inkling that there's some concept in Islam of being born knowing what's right and wrong.
I think that relates to the Deen al-Fitra. I'm pretty. It's just innate religion, innate sense
Is that
of
for
God.
religion only, or for questions of morality?
Deen is even though it's nowadays it's become synonymous with religion. Actually, originally it was quite a much broader term. So I think it could also encompass morality and just general worldview.
Because I was thinking what Big Lundy said about Christians having the spirit which guides them, and I thought that perhaps Fitra was the Islamic version of, rather than a spirit that guides, because there is no Trinity in Islam, that they're actually just born with the innate ability to decide for themselves, as long as they stick to the true path. That sense of morality won't get corrupted, and in a way they've then been guided.
Actually, you just reminded me, and this is something that I haven't read, but that I learnt at university. I do Islamic studies. There's a concept in Islam called wahi, which is which means basically like revelation, like a revelation from God. Although apparently you can also get a revelation from Shaitan. Cue satanic verses. Basically a wahi can come in the form of an omen, like signs in the skies or whatever. A wahi can come in the form of a direct revelation, like the Quran, which is sent via a messenger to a human, Muhammad, or any other previous scripture like the Gospels or the Torah. But a wahi is also the inbuilt nature, our inbuilt instincts that God has instilled within us. That is also a wahi. That is also a communication from God. So we have inbuilt in us the wahi from God, the instincts, the understandings and morality, which is from God. So maybe that fulfills that function.
It seems like
maybe that's a comparison.
It seems like they might have been borrowing that from Christianity, because I distinctly remember a Romans 1 passage that actually says specifically that God has imprinted his morality onto the heart of all men. So I think that would be that runs suspiciously parallel to what you're talking about.
Yeah, well, we see a lot of things which are parallel and a lot of things which were borrowed from other scripture. Absolutely. Yeah. Okay, Big Lundy, thanks a lot. I'll let you go.
Thanks for having me.
Then what we're going to do is we are going to talk to Shantanu.
It's a bit of a rubbish system,
I'll go ahead and drop out for you.
It's a bit of a rubbish system if you can have this kind of revelation from the good guy, but you can also get a revelation from the bad guy, and you can't tell the difference.
Hello?
Hello, Shantanu.
Hello. How's it going? Can you hear me?
Well, thanks. Yes, we can hear you. What is up?
Everything's great. I just had a question specifically to ask. Every time you guys in general debate the Muslims and so on and so forth, you always get the same argument that no, you've got it wrong there. This is the real interpretation, or that is the real interpretation. But one thing that is never used as evidence against them is the practices during Muhammad's time, because that would be really unchallengeable evidence, wouldn't it? Because if you knew that all men were wearing burqas during Muhammad's time, then you knew that is what Muhammad would have wanted. Or if you knew, based on the practices during Muhammad's time, you can conclusively say what Muhammad meant in that particular passage in the Quran.
Yeah, definitely. If you look at the when you read the Quran and someone argues the meaning of something, if you look at the context and try to look at the circumstances of the revelation, an example of this was chapter 4, verse 24, where it says that legal people are the married women of those that you've captured. I don't remember the exact wording. And
listed to you are those women whom your right hand possesses. So, ma malakat aymanukum.
And it specifically says something about even if they're married or something like this. Now, I remember reading this, and I saw a guy on YouTube that had talked about this is giving you permission to have sex with female slaves, even if they're married. And I said to him, no, you're wrong. It's giving them permission to marry them, because the argument that had been used with me by a Muslim, which at the time I fell for, was that these women were being they'd been captured and they were married, and some of them didn't want to go back to their husbands because they liked the life of a Muslim, and then this verse said that they can effectively, by marrying a Muslim man, their previous marriage would immediately become annulled, so this was a legal practice. And they said, if you look at it, it's listing all the people that you can marry.
Oh, right.
And at the time I accepted that. So I was telling this guy, no, you're wrong. You're definitely wrong. And I was explaining it all to him. And then one day I was reading a tafsir and I looked through it, and it said, this is who you can have sex with. During the time of Muhammad, a man come and said, these women are married, we don't want to have sex with them. And Muhammad said, don't worry, it's okay, you can. And as soon as you
actually, I can read you the Hadith right now if you'd like.
Go on.
Okay.
All right, 1 second. All right. Yes, I'll read you. This has been recorded in Sunan Abu Dawood, Sahih Muslim. Actually, this has been recorded by At-Tirmidhi, An-Nasai, At-Tabari, Muslim, Dawood, Abu Dawood, Ahmad ibn Hanbal. Like, this is, everyone's got this. So this is probably, if any hadiths are real, this one sounds like it's a real hadith. But I'm going to read you the version from Tafsir al-Quran al-Azim, which is the commentary of the Quran by the Muslim cleric, medieval cleric, Ibn Kathir. This is the most widely cited tafsir or commentary of the Quran that there is, and is considered to be probably the best tafsir. Maybe At-Tabari's tafsir is better. And this is what it says. Imam Ahmad recorded that Abu Sa'id al-Khudri said, we captured some women from the area of Autas who were already married, and we disliked having sexual relations with them because they already had husbands. So we asked the Prophet about this matter, and this ayah, Quranic verse, was revealed. Also forbidden are women already married except those whom your right hands possess. Consequently, we had sexual relations with these women. This is the wording collected by At-Tirmidhi and Nasai, Ibn Jarir,
But I've heard
and Muslim.
I've heard translations of that even being twisted, what the right hand possess means. But what I'm saying is something different. Just from historical evidence of the common practice at the time, can something not conclusively be said about those verses? Just from common practice rather than anecdotal.
Well, sure. I think that's rather than being anecdote, it's all anecdote, but I think that's like gives the specific historical context, asbab and nuzul, as they say, for which the verse was revealed. But yes, it was, by all accounts, it was common practice to, to go and capture women and rape them in times of war. So Muhammad's actions are no different from what most armies were doing back in those days. In fact, we actually have some pre-Islamic poetry, some famous poems where this bloke, I can't remember his name, he boasts about the fact that he would not rape the women that he captured in war, and that he was actually, instead he would refrain because he was, a good man. And you'll note that Muhammad's followers were initially quite reluctant to rape these women because they already had husbands. And then Muhammad, of course, comes along and says, don't worry, guys, I have a divine dispensation from God. It's all good.
Yeah, that's definitely there. And what about with regards to the dress code for women? Because there's quite a lot of variation. Should the head be covered or should the full body be covered, and so on and so forth? What was the practice during Muhammad's time? Was it the full body? Hello? Can you hear me?
Yeah, sorry, I had my microphone muted. Yes, actually, it's funny, but the Burqa is pre-Islamic, and I don't just mean Persians or Athenians who also had variations of the veil. Actually, in pre-Islamic Arabia, we have records from the Romans of the veil being used. And if I can just find, here we go. Okay, this is what Tertullian, a Roman historian, says. Let's see now. He says in his work, he says, and this is translated by Geoffrey Dunn, he says, Tertullian says concerning the women of pre-Islamic Arabia, he says, the pagan females of Arabia who do not cover the head but the total face as well in this fashion, such that they may be content with one eye free to enjoy half the light, rather than to prostitute the whole face, will judge you. A female there wishes rather to see rather than to be seen. So basically, women would cover up their entire bodies, only revealing their eyes, and some of them would cover up one eye, so they could only one eye would be showing.
But even then, the fact that Muhammad didn't condemn this would automatically so mean he was okay with it. He thought that was fine, wouldn't he?
Well, allow me to clarify the matter with the following hadith from from Sunan Abu Dawud, where Aisha, this is Sunan Abu Dawud, book 32, hadith number 4092, where Aisha bint Abu Bakr narrates that her sister, Asma bint Abu Bakr, entered upon the Apostle of God wearing thin clothes. The Apostle of God turned his attention from her. He said, O Asma, when a woman reaches the age of menstruation, it does not suit her to display her parts of body except this and this. And he pointed to her face and hands. So according to Muhammad, women have to be completely covered up except for their hands and their face.
Okay.
Well, there's another explanation, because it was to distinguish them from slaves. Because slaves could walk around any which way they wanted, and then they introduced this, that when they were going to pray, that they would not be assaulted or accosted or anything.
It's funny because the ones accosting them apparently were the Sahaba.
Okay, that does. Okay, Shantanu, does that clarify that?
Yeah.
Can I add a point to that?
Can I just quickly ask one more question, if I'm permitted? It's a very short question. Does it not baffle you that people like Newton and this I forget his name, but the gentleman in Pakistan who was responsible for the discovery of the Higgs boson, they were religious, and not just religious, but they believed in a particular religion. They weren't just general theists. Isn't that baffling to an extent? Because it's just the complete opposite of being rational, as far as I see it. It's to accept something purely out of faith. And Newton even believed in alchemy. I mean, that's how ridiculous it gets, and it just baffles me.
Well, it depends really on what exactly they believed about their religion, because what people believe about Islam, it really varies quite a lot. You've got people that will believe every hadith, absolutely everything, and then you've got people who believe that only parts of the Quran are still applicable today, and even those are mostly metaphoric, from which you should derive general guidance rather than strict instruction. Other people believe that it's a man's interpretation of what a far superior mind was explaining to him. People have got a lot of mental wriggle room when they're trying to host conflicting ideas in their mind. I've heard stories of a geologist. I think Dawkins wrote it in his God Delusion about a geologist who, like, during the week, the Earth was 4.7 billion years old? No, 4.6, and then I can't remember what it is.
His name was Kurt Weiss, and he basically cut out all the bits from the Bible that contradicted the science. He eventually
and then on a Sunday, and on a Sunday the Earth was 10,000 years old. And yet, like, during the week he'd believe one thing, and during the weekend he'd believe something entirely different. And he could continue that for a long period of time until that point that you just mentioned, where he no longer felt that he could host both conflicting ideas in his mind at the same time and had to make a choice. And rather than going with the one for which he had evidence, he went with the one which made him feel good.
Yeah.
Human brains, you know, I mean, we like to think how brilliantly logic we are and how clever and things, but we're not really designed to work out what's right. We're just designed to approximate things and survive based on fast approximations. You know, you approximate the movement of an object in order to avoid it. You don't actually work out where it's really going. You quickly approximate it and you move. This kind of thing has been in our evolutionary history for a long, long time, and humans do still approximate a lot of things, and we still do a lot on intuition. And even when we've retrained our brains to work in a scientific way and only base opinions on strong evidence, there's still this part of your brain that wants to act intuitively, and these kind of people do still make intuitive decisions. It's just whether they're a good scientist or not depends on whether they later check their intuitions through evidence. And you know, you can see this sometimes. This even with scientists, this doesn't happen. There was a famous story. I don't know if I've mentioned it before. There was a famous story of someone who was a columnist in a newspaper where people could write in and ask questions. This person had a really high IQ, and there was a game show on TV. And at the end of the game show, every week there were 3 doors, and the host would say, "Choose door A, B, or C." Behind 2 doors is a booby prize, and behind 1 door is a star prize. So the person had opened one of the doors. If they hadn't won the star prize the first time, the host would say, "You didn't win the prize. Now here's another no, that's it. Don't open the door." He'd say, "What do you want to choose, A, B, or C?" Right? And they say A, and then the host would go up and open either B or C to say, "Oh, it's a good job you didn't choose this other one, or you'd have failed. Now, do you want to stick with your original choice, or do you want to swap?" And someone wrote in and said, "Does it make any difference?" And the person in this column said, "Yes, it makes a difference. You should always swap, because the first choice that you made has got a 1 in 3 chance of being right, but if you swap, you've got a 2 in 3 chance of being right." And what they had was people with PhDs in mathematics writing in and complaining that this person was giving out false information and shouldn't be in that position to do it, and saying things like, "I teach probability, and for you to be saying things like this makes my job more difficult." And these people were acting on their intuition that this person was wrong, and if they'd actually just sat down and worked out the mathematics for it, they'd have seen they were right. So instead of working on using their main tool of reasoning, their intuition said this person's wrong. They jumped straight in and wrote in to condemn them. But the evidence shows that that person was right. So these people, despite how knowledgeable and logical they are, you know, intuition does affect people's lives still to a large extent.
So at the end of the day, we are all people, regardless of how clever we think we are and what we think about religion and whatever. I'd like to welcome people who are just popping in to see what we're all about. We're a call-in show. We are talking about Islam. We are trying to give a balanced view about what the religion is all about. We are answering questions from people who would like to know what Islam is, what is it based on, and what is real and what is not. So if you've got a question, stick around and we'll try and answer it. Okay, Shantanu, are you done? Are you satisfied? Are you happy?
Yeah, I am. Thank you very much.
All right, then what I'll do, then I'll let you go, and then what I shall do is I shall bring in No Faith, No Pain, who says he has a surprise for us.
The name of the quiz show. I think it was the Monty Hall show. Or something.
Hello.
The name of if you want to look up that example, look up the Monty Hall problem. Okay, carry on. Sorry.
No, that was interesting. Okay, no faith, no pain. I hope you're the lady on the left handling the submarine. What have you got for us?
Good evening. Nice to meet you all. That's the Northwest Air Ambulance in the UK, and the lady on the left is the one I'd like to meet, but I never have done.
Oh, giving you mouth to mouth.
Yeah, that's right. Anyway, yes, I've got a couple of leading questions, really, and then I'll get on to my main topic, and I'll try and be as quick as I can. I've just had half a bottle of red wine, so don't expect me to be entirely serious. But the first thing is, I'm looking through the the blog, and I'm looking at Hello, I'm Carter, which rather reminded me of Helena Bonham Carter. And I'm wondering if the panel has ever seen, about 10 years ago, the Planet of the Apes movie. And the question is, how many of you guys thought that she was rather fetching in Planet of the Apes and rather attractive? I had this conversation with Phil Helines, who agreed with me. She was rather sort of pretty and sort of nice. Do you guys understand where I'm coming from with that performance?
Well, I would agree that I found her more attractive in Planet of the Apes than I normally do.
She was a monkey or what?
I remember the first...
She was a chimpanzee, not a monkey. You mustn't say that.
Sorry.
I remember the first time I ever saw Helena Bonham Carter, and it was at the cinema in a film called Getting It Right, I think it was called. And she was really, really scary. And, you know, that feeling of being scared of her has never left me. So when they put her in Harry Potter as an evil witch, I thought, that's brilliant, because that really works for me.
Oh, it really works for me as well.
I always like the chimpanzee woman in the original Charlton Heston Planet of the Apes. And what I liked is that she was very kind and gentle, and her husband was as well, and that they were both really kind, gentle animals, and that's what really endeared them to me. It wasn't any form of physical attraction, no.
I noticed the other two are quiet on the subject. Phil Helines said it was a truly disturbing performance.
Well, Phil Helines and his goats. No more needs to be said.
Yeah. Well, this sort of leads me on to...
Can I just remind people to please click on the call to send a Skype call request in. Has anybody tried that yet? Sorry, no faith, no pain. I just wanted to ask the question. Kling, carry on.
Do you have any Islam-related questions?
Well, no,
Well, yes.
He was going to move on to something.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about it, they say that we're not related to chimps and so on, but, you know, we are very attracted to them. I mean, not always sexually, of course, but sometimes we are very attracted to them as, they beckon, they make human gestures and so on. And I know that evolution isn't exactly a great topic with Islamic people. But we were talking about camels earlier on, and one or two other things. And I'm thinking about the people I know who've worked in Saudi Arabia, and I've worked in the Middle East a lot. And there's one thing that I've always wondered, and your expertise on the panel might be able to help me here. What is the Quran's position with sex on animals? Is it banned?
The Quran says absolutely nothing about it. However, in Sunan Abu Dawood, which is the third most authentic hadith collection in Sunni Islam, we have two completely contradictory hadiths. The first says that the punishment for having sex with an animal is death. The hadith immediately following it, or maybe it's vice versa, says that there is no punishment for having sex with an animal.
And of course, Ayatollah Khomenei's opinion was that you can have sex with an animal as long as when you kill it, you only sell the meat to someone in another town.
What is that? His little green book?
It's an excerpt from his book. I remember reading it and thinking, he's a nutcase. Never become a vegetarian if you live in Iran.
Yeah. That absolutely amazes me. Now this brings on to my final point that I want to make about deviant sex generally, which started on about the question with Aisha and so on. Is that it just absolutely amazes me. I mean, in the Arab world, which is what I'm familiar with, rather than the Persian world or, too many people in the UK who are Islamic, I don't regard Arab people as Islamic. They are not the same thing. Arabs are Arabs, Islamic people are Islamic. But considering that in the Arab world people are so Islamic, the amount of deviant sex that goes on when I actually go there drives me crazy. I'm sure that Stopspamming has seen the same thing. Yep. I mean, when you have guys...
Sorry, no, I haven't seen it.
Or heard of it. When you've got guys in the UK who work in the aerospace industry in Saudi Arabia, they have to be on armed guard. I mean, these are my friends who go over there all the time. I've been over there working with British Aerospace, not directly. They're under armed guard, and it's because of the homosexual advances. Now, what that is saying to me, I don't know what you say. It's not that people are more gay or, want to have sex with animals. And I'm not saying that homosexual sex is deviant. What I'm saying is these are banned forms of sex in the Quran. But everybody in the Arab world is mad for it. And why? Is it repression?
I'll tell you something funny. There is a very, very, and I'll try to phrase this as delicately as possible. There is a very, very common... I would say stereotype, but I don't think it's a stereotype because I only have anecdotal evidence, but I've heard so many anecdotes about this. It is a phenomenon and a stereotype that Arab girls or Arab women are really into, let's say, sodomy, the backdoor entrance, intercourse, and it's a really common phenomenon. Which is funny because Muhammad explicitly forbade anal sex, very explicitly in the Hadith literature. I once heard this Christian fool, I think it was a Christian, saying, Surah 2, verse 223, which says, "Come unto your wives as you please," fields, meant that you can anally rape your wives, which is stupid because the Hadiths related to this explicitly said that Muhammad forbade anal sex, and yet I hear again and again of Arab girls being into anal sex. So what you're saying is correct. It's this kind of stuff is, and if you look on Google Trends, I believe that the country that because you can check which countries and which cities are searching certain key terms into Google the most often, and I think that Pakistan has the highest rate of typing in camel sex and donkey sex.
Yeah, there's plenty of those. But the funny thing is, what makes me chuckle is when I see two policemen walking through the road on patrol, and they are walking hand in hand. So this is quite common, and I've never quite understood this. The other thing is that if you go to a Sunni forum, for example, the most common search term there is masturbation. So it seems that there's a lot of repression. So I appreciate your question, and it really does look like it. So there's a lot of venting going on the internet because there's a lot of proxies being used from those countries because all those pages obviously are blocked inside. And it's absolutely, totally amazing how prioritized sex is in the country.
Yeah, I mean, before I pop off then, guys, I just want to make the point that I don't regard gay sex as deviant sex, DPR, I saw it in the chat. I do regard it as a form of sex that the Quran frowns upon, so I wanted to make that very clear distinction. Also want to make the clear distinction that I know quite a lot of Arab guys, and not a lot of them, they're really great guys. So I'm not saying that they're all deviants. That isn't the purpose of my question, so I just wanted to make that absolutely clear. The purpose and the thrust of my question is about the repression angle and wanting to talk about things that are sometimes uncomfortable. And you know what I mean? It's not coming from a point of view that I'm trying to reinforce any stereotypes or say that Arabs want to have sex with camels or anything like that. So I just wanted to make that absolutely clear, if that's okay.
So if
that's really appreciated.
If evolution is true, does that mean more people find chimps attractive sexually than they do gorillas.
Well, you might have a point there, because there'll have been a point where different types of humans were on the planet, and they would have interbred, and they would have looked slightly different, maybe more primitive, more ape-like, whatever. Imagine what the first Neanderthal having sex with the first human would have been like. How close were they? What did they think? Were they thinking they were having sex with animals? I think you've got to understand that if you're going to accept that as evolution, it may not be as incremental as you may otherwise think. And also we do keep pets, and we do kiss our dogs, and we do pet our monkeys. So, there might be dividing lines, but I don't have a problem thinking animals are cute.
Where are you going to? I'm just off to the bathroom to pet my monkey.
Right. Well, I don't trust myself after this much wine, so do you mind if I just pop off and listen to the show for a bit now, after I've lowered the tone?
Thank you
very
for the
much.
interesting contribution. Come on.
Okay, guys. Well, I'm so drunk I can't find the off button, so you'll have to cut me off.
Well, you're doing well.
Obviously, the flaw in his argument is if evolution was true, then why do more people have sex with sheep than chimps?
Okay, give it.
You just blew a massive hole in evolution right then.
I tell you what, Dawkins is going to be annoyed. He'll be thinking, if only I'd left that sheep alone.
Oh dear.
Okay, we don't have any other callers. Has anybody got something that they want to get off their chest?
I have two questions from comments. The first is from a German friend of mine, who asks, could you raise a question for me when you have a chance to do that? Here I am. I would like to know if the idea that Jesus is not the Son of God, / God himself, but rather just another prophet, was really new at the time of Muhammad. So, were there Christians before Islam who believed that Jesus was not the Son of God, but just a prophet? Does anyone know?
Well, I can't give you any sources, or I've got a vague memory of a documentary many years before I gave a damn, and I think they were called the Gnostics, and what they did is they used to write scripts before and after Jesus' time, and I think that some of the sayings attributed to Jesus predate Jesus' alleged birth, and have been attributed to scrolls written by Gnostics. And after Jesus, there was an idea amongst the Gnostics that, I'm confused. I'm thinking of the Gnostics one where he didn't die. He was lifted up to heaven alive. He was crucified but didn't die, because obviously him being so pure and magical and wonderful, he couldn't die. So no, sorry, I was thinking of another part of the Quran, not the part about him just being a prophet. But I don't think all of Christianity adheres to the Trinity. I don't know much about Christianity, but I'm pretty sure that not all Christians are Trinitarians. So it can't be a new thing.
I'm not 100% sure, but the Arian sect of Christianity, I think that they do not believe. They believe that Jesus and God were separate, or they believe that Jesus was completely human, I think. So perhaps. Okay. Oh no. Jesus is still, I think, divine. So it's an interesting question. I actually don't know if there is a sect of Christianity, or there was a sect of Christianity. I mean, yeah, in Arabia at the time of Muhammad, there were, let's see now, Monophysite, Jacobite Christians in Syria, the Ghassanids, Nestorian Christians in Iraq, and down the coast there on that side of Arabia. There were also monophysites in Abyssinia and in Yemen. So I think that possibly, maybe these heretical sects of Christianity were the source of Muhammad's funny views on Jesus.
Well, maybe Abhishek can help us out on this one because this is his topic. Abhishek, are you there?
Hi.
What have you got? Can you contribute, or do you want to just ask a question?
Yeah, we can hear you, Abhishek.
Hi, can't really hear you guys.
Hello. Can you hear us?
Okay, now I can.
Good. Go on then, off you go. Let us know what you wanted to say.
Yeah, so I just wanted to ask about some of the things Christians say about the Old Testament.
Right, in relation to Islam, or is this just a question about Christianity?
Actually, just Christianity.
Well,
if that's okay.
I don't know if anyone else knows anything about Christianity. Really, this is a show about Islam primarily. If you ask me anything on Christianity, if it's anything past Genesis, then I probably haven't read it.
And I think the same is for everybody. Okay, Abhishek, why don't you just quickly ask the question and we'll see if we can do anything with it.
Okay, I just want to ask what you guys think about the prophecies in Isaiah or Daniel.
Can you give an example of one of the prophecies? Well, first of all, are you of the opinion that these are actual prophecies that have come to someone through some superhuman source and prophesize things that are going to happen in the future and they've actually happened, or do you not believe that that's the case?
I'm not really sure. That's why I just want to ask you guys. Like, there's an example.
Well, my opinion of religious prophecies really can be summed up by the film The Life of Brian, where there's a scene to avoid the Romans. Brian is pretending to be a religious street preacher, and the person that he knocks down just before he gets there is saying, and in the future, someone will misplace something and not be able to find it, and he was sure that it was there not too long before he actually looked for it. That's basically my impression of religious prophecies. Extremely vague. They can apply to anything. They've never got a limitation. They never say by the year 2000. So the very fact, for a start, that they're open-ended means you could have 1,000 prophecies.
I hear you guys twice.
You have to mute the blog TV.
How do you do that again?
Just click on the website. Click in
on
your
the
browser.
blog TV, under the refresh button, there's a little microphone. Just click on that.
There's a little speaker, you mean?
Okay, I got it.
Yeah, the fact that these are open-ended prophecies means that you can throw out as much crap as you want, and now and again people will say, well, this looks suspiciously true, so there you go, it's accurate, it's a prophecy. And then for the other 99% of the prophecies that were evidently wrong, because there's no time limit on them, you can just say, well, we're just waiting for these ones. We've had a few signs that they're right. We're just waiting for the rest. So we've just got to have some patience. And I mean, anyone can do that. If you're not precise, if you're vague, you talk in metaphors and you give it no limit, you can just make predictions all day long. They're absolutely useless. They don't predict anything. You know, something about Israel will rise again or something like that. Well, what would an Israeli, what would a Jew, what would they say? Oh, Israel will fall and then it will never reform again. We may as well give up.
Okay,
No,
Abhishek, do you want to comment on that?
They're going to say one day it will reform and we'll be really strong.
Yeah, an example where, like in the Daniel, apparently there's a prophecy about the Persian Empire being destroyed by Alexander the Great. I think it's Daniel chapter 8 somewhere.
What does it say specifically? Who is doing what to whom on what day?
Okay, hold up. Let me just look it up.
Right, Daniel 8 says, I don't know which part's relevant, it's only short. In the 3rd year of King Belshazzar's reign, I, Daniel, had a vision after the one that I had already appeared to me. In my vision, I saw myself in the citadel of Susa, in the province of Elam. In the vision, I was beside something about horns. No, it is a bit long. Something about goats in there.
Yeah, part about goats and a ram.
A goat? Yeah, sorry, carry on.
He had a vision about this ram with 2 horns, and that's supposed to represent Persia and Media, and this goat with 1 horn, and that one goat smashed the horns of the ram. And
okay, Abhishek, we can cut this off right here. This doesn't work. This is exactly what Rationalizer was saying, and what you are doing is there's a mentioning of a goat and this means it's this and no, this is not anything. This is you interpreting it. This is the same as the quatrains of Nostradamus. This it's nothing. It doesn't say who is doing what to whom on what date, and this is why we reject it outright, because it doesn't mean a thing. This is somebody who wants to see something in there, can interpret anything they want into this. It can also mean that if I want to go to the toilet, I need to take my toilet paper with me. It can mean anything. So let's just leave it, okay?
The thing is that later on he mentioned that that goat is supposed to represent Persia, and the horn, the king of Greece, something like that.
The thing
it doesn't say so, so let's just leave it because it doesn't make sense.
You can dismiss this anyway from the text itself, right? Because it says, as I was thinking of this, suddenly a goat with a prominent horn between its eyes came from the west, crossing the whole earth without touching the ground. Now, as far as I know, Alexander the Great didn't fly around in aeroplanes conquering the entire world. He did actually touch the ground, unless, of course, you want to say that means he never took his shoes off. You know, there's always some kind of clause. Oh, he didn't touch his ground, that means he liked to wear socks. People can always make up some kind of excuse for the parts that are wrong, and then make these absolutely huge leaps of faith that horn means the Horn of Africa and 2 horns means Alexander the Great.
Okay.
It's actually in
also
8.
All right, Abhishek, do you have anything else for us?
I just want to make one quick point. As always, I mean, this so often happens with religious literature. The religious book making the prophecy was actually written after the frickin' event that's supposed to be prophesying. So the book of Daniel, and I'm only going off Wikipedia, but the source here is the Catholic Study Bible published by Oxford University Press. We're told that it was, although the book has been historically classified as prophetic, the style of writing is apocalyptic, which was popular between 2000 BC and 1000 CE. Alexander the Great lived in 200 BC and 100 CE. Alexander lived in 300 BC. It's like 100 years before this period. And also, I mean, I remember watching a documentary where they talk about how the Bible was oral tradition until like around the time of Jesus, when it began to be written down. So, I mean, it's like with the Quran. I mean, we're told, the Romans will be victorious over the Persians. well, the Quran is making a prophecy into the future, but the Quran was frickin' written as a book after the event happened. So it's very easy to project backwards in time and say, well, yeah, we predicted this would happen. Well, you know, I mean, it's written after the event.
Let's leave it at that. Abhishek, do you have another topic, or is that it?
Yeah, I actually agree with you guys. I just want to know what you guys think.
Okay.
So.
All right, then. Thank you very much for this. Let us now go and see what Ali has. There we go. And please don't call in.
Hello. Can you guys hear me?
Good to see you back. Haven't seen you in a while. What have you got for us?
All right. So, a few things. Since the topic of the show is about science and Islam, I figured I would take us into the never-ending hole of fetal development and the Big Bang.
Fetal development and the Big Bang. Doesn't fetal development come after the Big Bang?
If you are interested in all of that stuff, the next show on the 28th, where Nadir Ahmed is going to call in, he's going to be convincing us of all the scientific facts in the Quran. The Big Bang and how Muhammad had a cure for the bubonic plague and all sorts of stuff. He's going to be doing that on the 28th. Yeah, it's an interesting subject, and it's certainly the part of Islam that interests me the most. So you'll probably want to be watching in 2 weeks' time. You'll probably enjoy that show. But yeah, fetal development and the Big Bang. I mean, what do you want to tell us about those?
Well, I mean, the Muslim claim is that the Quran, 1,400 years before modern science, knew about fetal development in the Quran. I mean, the show is about. This episode is about science in the Quran. Is that not true?
No, it's just what we started with. I mean, this is basically, if it's anything to do with Islam, we'll talk about it. We don't really have a theme other than it's broadly to do with Islam.
Okay. Yeah, see, the mistake was that I was under the impression that Nadir Ahmed, I always confuse his name, was coming onto the show this week. He's actually on next week. So next week will be science. I mean, you can bring up this is fine.
I get it.
But next week is the... Yeah.
Well, I mean, I just wanted to bring up the obvious, crap of what they actually try to use as science in the Quran, and those are usually the two examples that they cite right off bat. I mean, pretty much half the comments on my channel are exactly those two examples in response to everything.
I mean, basically, this whole thing, right? There's back in the 80s, a guy called Zindani. He tricked a load of scientists to come over to Islamabad and various other places. And what he told them varied, but in general, it was either we want to revive science in the Muslim world because the mullahs are trying to suppress it, or we'd like you to come and talk about the relevance of our religious book to do with science, and we could investigate how they match and how they don't, and it's an objective thing. And basically what Zindani was doing, he was setting himself up with a job. After this, he became Minister of Religious Miracle Signs in the Quran or something, but he became a government minister afterwards. Now, in a lot of the cases, they trick these people. They give them very leading questions, and then when they gave hypothetical answers to the hypothetical questions, they'd cut them out of context, saying stuff. He did all kinds of tricks. But the biggest one...
Your microphone is cutting off.
The statements that were had most impact. They had a big conference. The press were there. The room was filled with Muslim and non-Muslim people. There was loads of press ambushing people outside. Is it true the Quran contains miraculous information on embryology? And it was all really big news. And the star of the show was Keith Moore, who's saying there is no way Muhammad could have known all of this information. Therefore, I conclude that it must have come from He who knows all, Allah. And that is basically that was basically the start of this entire embryonic miracle stuff in the Quran. And if you actually look at what is written in there, it's practically word for word what Galen wrote. And anything beyond what Galen has written is just extrapolation to the point of pure fantasy. You know, the mixture of the male and female seed or something suddenly becomes a sperm and an egg and all sorts of things to do with ovums and absolute pure fantasy. The whole lot of it is pure fantasy. But the notable thing is that Keith Moore got a book deal out of it, and it was funded by the multimillionaire Osama bin Laden, or multi-billionaire, I assume. And I mean, how Keith Moore could be less credible, I couldn't have imagined until I saw a video not so long ago where someone said to him, "Why didn't you become a Muslim?" And he spent 10 minutes not answering the question, basically ending up saying, "Well, I'm a Christian, so I'm kind of a Muslim because we all believe kind of the same thing and kind of worship in our own kind of way." There's nothing more to be said on it, really. I mean, P.Z. Myers called out Hamza and Adnan on it when Adnan was saying, but the flesh comes after the bones. He said, "Is that what it says?" "Yes, absolutely." And he clearly said, "Absolutely." So, well, it's wrong because they form at the same time. In that case, the word says simultaneously. And made such a fool of himself, and that Aisha spent so long trying to repair the damage to their what credibility they had amongst Muslims. And you could see on Muslim forums people warning other Muslims, "Oh, be careful, brothers and sisters, when saying this. It's an error in our understanding. The Quran actually says that they form at the same time." So people were all warning each other to change their opinion of what the words clearly meant. And then, of course, Aisha came out with some rubbish about the cells which eventually form muscles distally migrate onto the tissue that eventually becomes bone. Therefore, it's being clothed. The bone is being clothed with the flesh. The whole lot is a load of rubbish. They're really vague words, and to claim that they're a miracle is just fantasy.
But are you getting?
By the way,
what kind of claims are you getting? Are you getting anything different?
Well, the point is, no. Absolutely the exact same thing. And the point that I actually wanted to make was that even if it were true, which I don't give up for a moment, that still would not count. The only way that you could say there was a scientific miracle in the Quran would be if you took the Quran into the lab and came out with a new theory, convinced most people that you actually got this new theory, a new test from the Quran, and were then able to perform this test and figure out some new fact about the universe that we did not know before. And that is the only time that you could use something like that as a miracle. It could be, even if it were right, which I don't think it is, it still doesn't matter.
Yeah, the best models are predictive models. So the very fact that someone discovered this information through an alternative method shows that the alternative method was more useful to humanity than the method they're claiming predicted the information.
Right. Post hoc miracles don't really work, is the point I was making there. There is another point/question that I wanted to make. Now, this doesn't really have a whole lot to do with science, but it's kind of a little bit. I've just actually had a hadith thrown my way. I think maybe Klingschor saw it as well, but the question is actually kind of to him. It was about a supposed claim about prophets not their bodies after death not disintegrating or being eaten by bacteria and maggots. And in fact, that Muhammad himself had started to rot before they even buried him. And the claim is that they thought that he would come back to life like Jesus did, and so they delayed burying him until his stomach got big from the breaking down of the body after his death. And I was wondering what the truth of that claim is, or if Klingschor actually knew anything about that.
Yeah, to be completely honest, I know very little about it. Yeah.
No, there's no literature from that time. We don't have any facts about it. Everything that we know has been made up. The funny thing is, we have complete stories. We say, he died here on this spot and he was buried here and this is what happened on that day, at that hour, at that minute. This is all fabricated. I don't know of any literature, anything verified that mentions anything like this.
Right. I mean, this was from their own literature. This was from their own literature. From Bukhari, there is a hadith that actually explains what happened when he died. That he died on a Monday, and they waited until Wednesday to bury him until his stomach got big from decay. But now the other claim is that before he died, he told them in some place, which I'm not exactly sure of, that bodies of prophets do not decay as regular human bodies do. And what that does, by their own admission, what that does to their own claims of prophecy for this guy.
Yeah, here I have in Sunan Abu Dawud, we're told that in Book 3, Hadith number 1042, we're told that Muhammad says that, basically this is the Hadith, narrated Aus ibn Aus. The Prophet said, "Among the most excellent of your days is Friday. On it Adam was created, on it he died, on it the last trumpet will be blown, and on it the shout will be made, blah, 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 picnics and rainbows. So invoke your blessings to me on that day, for your blessings will be submitted to me." The people asked, "O Messenger of God, Rasulullah, how can it be that our blessings will be submitted to you while your body is decayed?" He replied, "Allah, the Exalted, has prohibited the earth from consuming the bodies of prophets."
And that is a sahih, right? This is...
I don't know if it's Sahih, but this is in Sunan Abu Dawud. Yeah.
Captain, you've been very quiet. You got something to say to this?
Yeah, I wanted to say something about the Keith Moore thing. I was watching a video on YouTube where it was a lecture given by Keith Moore to Muslims in Canada, I think, in 1988. And I thought he said something like really important, like, he said that he doesn't speak Arabic, and he was given the translations by the scholars from Saudi Arabia, and that he's simply giving his interpretations. And then he said, I'm quoting him, "We are not saying these are accurate." So, we're not really sure if the people who went to Saudi Arabia and, spoke of all these scientific claims actually believed in them.
No, what had happened is there'd be a vetting process before the recording, and what happened is Zindani would ask questions, and they'd say, "How does this relate?" And they said, "Well, it's not quite right." Say, what actually happens is it shakes or something, and then Zindani would say, "Well, that word also means to shake." And they say, "Well, in that case, it's right." And Zindani's approach was basically go through, ignore anything that was just outright wrong, and then anything which had any kind of sound of being right, if he could attribute multiple meanings to the word, which made it more accurate. The idea was, with some of the people, they believed that the idea wasn't that they were proving the Quran is right. What they were doing was, this is according to Pete Palmer, who did a talk on geology in the Quran. He was under the impression that periodically they review the language, the words of the book. And because the meaning of words changes over time, what they do is they periodically review the book, view it against science, and reinterpret the meaning of the words so that it's correct with science, so that people can basically understand the meaning of the Quran in light of modern science. And this is what he was told. It's a reinterpretation of the words. So as he helped Zindani to reinterpret the meaning of the words, what he was actually doing was helping Zindani to manipulate the meaning of the words, so that when he gave his interpretation, the Quran sounded not only as if it was correct, but that it predicted scientific discovery.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense.
There's an interview with Pete Palmer. I mean, to be honest, I talk too much, so it's quite a long interview. But if you go on YouTube to the channel This Is the Truth Uncut, there's an interview with 4 of those scientists. Pete Palmer's one of them, and you can hear him saying it for himself.
And there's a number of videos on this. I think all of us have made videos on embryology and Keith Moore. I actually looked at the person of this Dr. Moore and the claims that Muslims make about him. I mean, after a while, after going through all these exercises, Professor Dr. Emeritus Moore is the greatest scientist on earth who has ever spoken to anybody about any embryology. And if anybody is the best on this, it is this guy. He's just a celebrity author, that's it.
Actually, I did a little bit of extra research, and it's often what happens is that the Quran says what it says, and then we point out that the Quran, what the Quran says, is pretty much a really simplified version of the ancient Greek embryological views, and then when someone like Hamza Sortas comes along and tries to cast any aspersions on it, Muslims therefore conclude, so it must be from God. If there's any little error with the Greek view, or any tiny little discrepancies or anything, it must be therefore from God. And what I want to demonstrate right now is that even if you throw away the Greek model, Muhammad could have very easily known about everything in the Quran. So what is the first stage? The first stage is nutfa, which is semen.
You forgot the mud.
Oh, come on, that's Adam. We're not to forget about Adam. With the embryological process, we have semen, and it's not like Muhammad, ever had sex, right? It's not like Muhammad had any wives or anything, so he could have. It's not like we have hadiths in Sahih al-Bukhari which says that Aisha used to wash Muhammad's semen off his clothes, apart from, Sahih al-Bukhari, Volume 1, Book 4, Hadith number 229, or Sahih al-Bukhari, Volume 1.
He's aware of it, and
that is where Hamza is going to say, nutfa does not refer to semen, it refers to the sperm.
Well, and the zygote.
And the zygote, as well as fertilization.
But the definition of the word nutfa is not semen or zygote. Traditionally, it just meant semen.
Small droplets. It actually means a small amount of water. So
even better, yeah. Right? So how could Muhammad have known that, known about a small drop of water? It's not like he ever ejaculated or anything.
How could he know? Because they take this to mean the sperm mixes with the zygote, whereas nutfa meaning a small drop of fluid, the male drop of fluid mixes with the female drop of fluid. Oh, guess what? That's exactly what Galen said. And then if you look at Hadiths, he's talking about a thin liquid. He's clearly talking about vaginal lubricant. There's a Hadith where he talks about which of the man or the woman who basically climaxes first. That's who the child will take after. You know, he's talking about the juice, not the sperm and the ovum.
The Quran, by the way, the Quran explicitly says that you are created from a place between your father's ribs and spine, and I still have never had that explained to me. What process is being explained there?
No, that's
what is explained there. What exactly does this mean?
Now, even though Galen believed that semen came from the kidney, I think you believe that for a boy it comes from the kidney and from the woman it comes from somewhere else. I can't remember.
Actually, no, that was Hippocrates. Galen actually believed that the testicles is where the sperm came from.
So there was disagreement in the time between Greeks and Romans as to whether it was the kidneys or the testicles which produced semen. Which is why the kidneys are now called the reins. That's basically they agreed to disagree. There was belief that kidneys produce semen, probably because the vas deferens goes up around a cord that comes from the kidney to the urethra, and because of this confusion, it's easy to look at the Quran and say he is formed from fluid ejaculating from between backbone and ribs, and you could say it looks suspiciously like he's saying that the semen comes from between the backbone and ribs, but of course that's only a fool's interpretation of the Quran. Anyone with true knowledge knows that either this means between the man's backbone and the woman's ribs, even though the ejaculation doesn't come out from between the woman's ribs, or this is the scientific miracle now, during fetal development of the fetal, all right?
Oh no! Oh no!
The miracle, because Muhammad couldn't have known this, so it could only have come from Allah. During fetal development of the male, the testicles descend down the body. They originate in the same position where the kidney develops. Now, how could Muhammad have known 1400 years ago that testicles develop near the kidneys? It's a miracle. But of course, the argument to that is, well, at which stage do you decide which stage far back in the fetal development do you decide that the miracle claim is no longer feasible? Because at some point you're a single cell in the ovum that multiplies. So if I said that semen comes from my left foot little toe, I am actually correct because if you go back far enough, my left toe actually originates at the same place as my testicles.
All right.
Also,
a whole lot of nonsense, as we can see. I'm actually in a discussion at the moment regarding inheritance. And when I show that this is no longer feasible, it doesn't work mathematically, they tell me, well, I don't know what I'm talking about, because actually it doesn't say, well, the woman gets 1/6 and the father gets 1/6 when they have children, but only if they have a son. Because they are just reinterpreting a word as it pleases them as they go along. And then if you then show them that this makes even more of a mess, then they say, well, it can also mean children, so it depends on what is meant here, and we know what is meant is always the right way around.
Well, of course, it obviously makes some sense, because there are Islamic lawyers all over the world that deal with inheritance issues and calculate how much each person gets. So, it's obviously got to make sense, or they wouldn't be able to practice it.
But these are exactly humans do it. This is exactly the point.
No, but the proof is in the pudding, as they say. The internet is a wondrous thing that puts people in contact with information. And I'm pretty sure that if you go to any online Islamic inheritance calculator and put in some difficult numbers, obviously all of them are going to come up with the exact same answers.
No, they don't.
Because it's a science. Yeah, it's called being facetious. I was being facetious.
If I input this into different calculators.
Yeah, that was my point. That was what I was saying. If you go and put it in, I tried it on I found 3 or 4, and I put the same figures into all of them, and I got as many different answers as websites that I found with automatic calculators. Yeah. So, it's obviously, considering its inheritance, it was
quite
worthy of mention. Yeah, exactly. It's not an exact science.
No, it's very human. This is the whole point.
So people might be able to claim there's science in the Quran, but they're not on strong footing when they say there's any exact science in it.
And this is exactly the example what Captain brought up with Moore, that you can say anything that you want, and then you interpret what is being said by somebody like Moore, and then all of a sudden it all fits together. And then they pay Moore so well that I saw the email that you sent to Rationalizer. We said, please, I do not want to talk about this any longer, because he was pushing him to at least admit that he was not a Muslim. And he said, listen, just leave me alone, please. I think that he was being pressured so much, and he was actually getting scared that if he said any more, that there would be some sort of contribution from somebody who had paid him.
The thing is, I'd written to him and said, do you stand by what you said? Did you become a Muslim? He wrote back and said, I stood by what I said, but I did about the Quran, and I did not become a Muslim. And I wrote back and said, well, one of the things that you said was that nobody could have known this information at the time. Are you not familiar with the writings of Galen? And he wrote back, I don't want to talk about this anymore. Please, no more contact of any kind, or something like that. But then I later bought his book, and if you read his book, on the same page as the Islamic view, it mentions the beliefs of the Greeks. So not only did he know this information, he'd written it in a previous book. A book previous to when he went out and did this talk.
And
so the guy knew this information. I didn't think he didn't know it, but clearly the evidence shows he knew this information. Now, the thing is the Quran looks almost identical to what Galen wrote, and literally, not only is it almost the same, if you look at 2 paragraphs of what Galen wrote, literally sequential paragraphs, the same points pop up in the exact same order in the Quran, saying more vaguely the same thing. And people say, I've had people say, look, Galen specifically said this. How come Muhammad left out all of the wrong bits? Therefore it's a miracle. And I think, well, if your idea of a miracle is your God can say something almost identical to a human was wrong, more vaguely, and just get it a little bit more right, then your standard of miracles is far lower than mine.
Yeah, it's the same God who told Galen, come on.
I just want to come in and say, with the whole embryo stuff, how it is often, how could I have known about the embryo? And at first I used to just laugh and just say, it's not like, all the Arabs were vegetarians. They never killed any, animals ever. And so obviously, because they're vegetarians, so they never could have killed a female animal and found a fetus inside, right? But, and that was just jokes, because of course they would have, at some point they would have killed a female animal, and then they would have discovered an embryo inside. But we actually have frickin' hadiths, right? In Sunan Abu Dawud, Book 15, Hadith number 2821, we're told, narrated Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, I asked the Apostle of Allah about the embryo. He replied, eat it if you wish. And another version runs that Musaddad's version says, "We said, Apostle of God, we slaughtered a she-camel, a cow and a sheep, and we found an embryo in its womb. Should we throw it away or should we eat it?" And Muhammad replied, "Eat it if you wish, for the slaughter of the mother serves its slaughter." So Muhammad knew, they were killing female animals and they were discovering embryos, and Muhammad knew about embryos. Like, we have direct contact here. Even better, right? At one point, when Muhammad was praying, one of the believers, one of his opponents, whose name was, I think, Uqba ibn Abu Mu'ayt, when Muhammad was praying, Uqba went up to Muhammad and put a camel fetus on his head. So, I mean, it's clear that Muhammad knew of freaking fetuses and embryos. Like, he had direct contact with them. So, I don't understand. Yes.
How can Muhammad know about the microscopic stages where the embryo looked like a leech? That is clearly miraculous, yeah.
Yes. Well, I inshallah, freaking Bismillah, I better convert right now.
So that this is very scientific, and yet at the same time, if you go into the literature, into the Hadiths about this, you see that the time of the orgasm determines the look of the baby or the gender of the baby. So it's superstitious to the highest degree, and then the scientific claims are made afterwards.
Hey guys, so I just want to go back to the point about the body, the dead body thing. Wouldn't it just be like a perfect experiment? I'll turn me into a Muslim today if they just went back, excavated Muhammad, and showed us the uncomposed body.
That would be a good test. And Adam and Moses.
And it's doable. But we know where Muhammad was buried.
I think you're being
we know where Muhammad was buried.
If they dug up his body and it was perfectly preserved, you wouldn't become a Muslim. You'd just say, "What? They embalmed him?"
No, I would. I would become a Muslim. I absolutely would. It would be extremely unlikely that the Arabs at that time. I mean, let's do it. Let's do it and find out. I'm willing to bet my shirt that if we find a skeleton, it would be good enough. But never mind that.
We don't still know where he's buried, do we?
Yeah, we do.
Do we?
It's in Medina,
yeah.
Right?
But do you think for 1 minute, if you opened it, saw these bones, that someone wouldn't say, "Aha, it's not really Muhammad. It's fake because Muhammad would never have allowed this in case his grave became a shrine, and that's how we know it's not really him." Yeah.
Well, they could say that, but it wouldn't be convincing to me. So, if they want to turn most of us into Muslims, I think that's a great experiment.
I think though that your line of reasoning is a bit flawed. That Muslims will say things that don't convince you. There's no surprise there, is there?
That was very polite.
No, not really. Another point I wanted to make too about you guys were talking earlier about having sex with slave girls and their customs or whatever. I just wanted to bring up that Umar ibn al-Khattab, who's considered to be the most just of the khulafa, the caliphates, he would not allow the slaves to cover their boobs. And if he walked by and saw a slave who was covered, he would remove her clothes forcibly. So, I don't know, just another, shows you how just these people were.
Where did you read this? Because I remember reading this, but I can't remember where.
This is, it's actually in, Umar ibn al-Khattab wrote, or at least he has his own Masnad.
This was Fitra.
Yeah, that's right. His own, and Fasirat al-Sahaba. And that's where you can see that. And I think it's pretty widely agreed that was the case. I haven't heard any criticism of the behavior anyways. I haven't heard anybody try to deny it even.
Okay.
And related to that, like, I went on a website, an Islamic fatwa website, which said that, like, the slave women don't have to, cover their breasts. Not only that, but women in general don't have to cover their breasts in front of their father or their brother. Really weird.
Right, because the aura does not apply.
Yeah.
It does not apply at home. So, as a matter of fact, even they could actually technically walk around naked. Oh wait, is it just a man's aura at home?
No. Hang on.
The female aura in front of her mahram. It's okay. Like.
Yeah, but the area between the knees and the belly button is still sacred.
That's what I was saying. Does it? So then it's a man's aura at home. Because that doesn't make any sense because it doesn't differentiate. Oh wait, no, it does. It does. Okay, all right, never mind.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
All right,
if you want some Muhammad DNA, I remember Concordance did a video called The Bucket Chain, which through maths he claimed that we're all directly descended from Genghis Khan or someone. So I think actually if you do the work out the maths, there's enough ancestors involved to also claim that we are all direct descendants of Muhammad. If his video is correct.
My mother's side of the family claims to be direct descendants of Hussein. Claim to be. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's the claim anyways.
There are a lot of people
I tend to believe it. Yeah, I tend to believe it because from what I understand, they had a whole shitload of kids, and not all of them were killed. And so I actually...
Although the Abbasids made a damn good effort to try and exterminate...
Oh, they did.
Muhammad's bloodline. Which might be surprising to the non-Muslims listening, but yeah, the great Muslim dynasty, the Abbasids, under whose science flourished, made a very concerted effort to exterminate all of Muhammad's descendants because they were rivals politically.
Yeah, but from what I understand, that effort was a disaster. It was a drastic failure because, from what I understand, there are millions of his direct descendants through Fatima and Ali still running around today.
Yeah, but aren't there Christians running around making the same claims that they have the DNA of Jesus?
I think that would be a harder claim to make because Jesus didn't really have any wives or daughters that we know of, where Muhammad actually did. I mean, we know that Ali and Fatima had a bunch of kids, and then their kids had a bunch of kids, and a lot of them did get away.
It's a very difficult claim for Christians to make that they have DNA for Jesus, because surely there would be his Y chromosome would be pretty unique, because he would have no father to inherit it from, would he? It'd be like a God Y chromosome or something.
Oh, that's interesting.
Because surely you could analyse his DNA and go, wow, he's got miracle DNA on one half, but his mitochondria DNA looks pretty normal from his mum. Someone in the channel said something about should we clone Muhammad if we had his DNA? And I just, my brain went off on a little fantasy about the film of Jurassic Park, and they're going through and they're looking at all the different dinosaurs that they've cloned. And at one point, they say something to him, he turns around and goes, "What? You cloned velociraptors?" As if that was the big mistake. And I just see this film now, he's driving around and he goes, "What? You cloned Muhammad?" There's all these Muhammads.
I was just going to say, if Muhammad acted the way he did when he supposedly acted the way he did, I think that he would be like a homeless guy, as Christopher Hitchens said, selling pencils from a cup. Shouting at subway passengers from some urine smelling dirty clothes.
Well, yeah, exactly, because he was in the right place at the right time, saying the right words. I don't think it would really matter what he said today. Most people just wouldn't believe him. There are, people who join cults and stuff still fall for this. But, he'd just be one of many, many of the world's cults. He'd probably have a really crap website trying to give everyone a message, and you can just see his website now. There is a God. Look at the trees, look at the sky, look at the camels, and people. Yeah.
You know what? Muhammad has a lot in common with Joseph Smith. So maybe he would still be able to create this type of thing.
I think that Muhammad was actually a blueprint for Joseph Smith. I think Joseph Smith actually consciously copied some of Muhammad's stuff, or was consciously inspired by him.
Yeah, I read that Joseph Smith was supposed to have said something like, "It's either," I think it was like, "It's either hell or the Al-Quran," or something like that, which is funny because Al meaning the. He said, or the Quran. I thought, yeah. You're divinely inspired, aren't you? What I love about that religion, it's one of the few religions you can just dismiss in a couple of minutes. It's the words from God, and he wrote it down and it was printed, but there's different editions because it was just printing errors that they corrected, except for this one part where originally Mary was called the Mother of God, and then later it was changed to Mary, the Mother of the Son of God. And so it went from Jesus was God to Jesus was the Son of God. And I thought, what kind of infallible being needs to bring out an errata for their book because they forgot that they weren't their own son? Sorry to take it onto Mormonism for a moment there.
Okay,
by the way,
are there any other points?
No, thank you guys.
Because I've got a question that would interest me. We've had over the last couple of years from Muslims saying that the West is always oppressing Muslims, that they are dictating what goes on in Iraq, what goes on in Afghanistan, and everybody is being oppressed and suppressed and blah, blah, blah. But now the question is, Syria is asking for intervention. Syrians are asking the West, whatever that may be, but we'll just take it for the time being, the West to intervene and help. But now what happens if Muslims ask for help in Syria? Doesn't that mean that them Muslims, the other side, is then going to claim that the West is again interfering?
No,
yeah,
they will ignore it. They will ignore it to the hills. They did the same thing in Bosnia. They came running for help, and the West gave the help that was asked of them. And now you never hear that mentioned. Ever. They always talk about Palestine. They always talk about Iraq. They always talk about this and that, but they never ever bring up Bosnia.
Yeah, they never discussed the war where the West went to kill Christians in order to protect Muslims. No, they don't bring that up, do they?
Or Kuwait, in Kuwait, Muslims were killing each other, and they were specifically called in to help Kuwait. And even though I had relatives living in Iraq at that time, in Kuwait, and they said that the way the Iraqis treated the Kuwaitis when they invaded them was deplorable. They destroyed their houses. If they caught their women, they were raped. It was what you'd hear, like from where war crimes are being locked up at the ICC. But the West is called in to help, and again, never mentioned.
So what do you say? Should the West intervene or not?
Look, here's the way I see it: is if you're going to do something that is right, then you shouldn't really expect to be applauded for it by people who you already think are assholes. And I think that it would be a disaster to let Syrians get killed because we think that the Iranians and the Saudis will say, "Oh, American interference." I mean, I certainly don't want to live with people's lives knowing that we could have done something and we didn't because of that. And they're going to do that, and I don't think that there is any way to get around it. But you just have to say, are we going to let a bunch of people get murdered and slaughtered, or are we going to actually do something regardless of what will be said or whether or not we will be thanked for it later?
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you for that. And Klingschor, your opinion?
You can't.
I was going to say
to death, can you? Just because.
Rationalizer, we'll get to. Let Kling finish.
I was going to say, before Saddam Hussein was committing genocide, on the Marsh Arabs, on the Kurds, and so on the Shiites. And like people, like there were calls for the United States to intervene, to come to Iraq, and the Kurds said, we're going to have a big rebellion, come and help us, all these kinds of things. When the I don't know, I can't remember who was it, the United States, was it the coalition forces who invaded Iraq? I can't remember. Or was they in Afghanistan? Who cares? Thousands and thousands of people were lining the streets, waving and cheering, and then now what we hear is, oh yes, the evil West invaded and oppressed Iraq. Like it's you can't win. You can't win because if you...
Or just recently with Libya.
Let him finish.
It's like... Oh, sorry. One second. It's like a YouTuber, Cardinal Virtues, said, if the West does nothing, they're supporting evil, corrupt, fascist, governments. But if they intervene, then they're oppressing us. They're like, you can't win. If they do nothing, they're condemned. If they do something, they're condemned. Like,
okay.
I mean...
Rationalizer, what is your opinion on this? Go.
Sorry, I had to find my mic on mute. But all I was going to say is, I'd rather go in and help some people, stop them getting killed, than say, no, let them get killed, because if we went in, some people we're not friends with will call us nasty names. It's not much of an excuse for not going in. And even though, in advance, we know that these people are calling out for help, just about everyone in the world will recognise that fact and say, well, yes, the Syrians did invite them in. However, after a certain period of time, we will be accused of outstaying our welcome.
Mm.
We were asked to come in and help, but then while we were there, we tried to take over.
Yes.
And, that is exactly what's going to happen. That's what happened with Iraq. We helped people. But then after that, we decided to stay and try and run the place for ourselves. That'll probably be what happens. But
okay.
The thing is when you get in, I don't think there's ever a quick exit from one of these. So people to expect us to go in, fix it, and then quickly bugger off is just unreasonable.
Okay, Captain.
I want to give the perspective of what Muslims actually think about this. Not Western Muslims, but Muslims, in Muslim communities in India or Pakistan or maybe, the Arab countries. Where I come from, they don't like the West. They don't like the fact that the West are financially and, technologically superior. They don't like that. So, and, whatever the West does, they're going to find reasons to hate them. So, so it doesn't matter, whether the West, goes into Syria or not. They're going to be hated one way or the other.
So it's a lose-lose situation, the same what we have in Kuwait, where everybody conveniently forgets that there was a reason for them going into Kuwait, that it was a Muslim attacking a Muslim country. Thank you, Rashman. Okay, so it's actually a bit overtime, so I think on that bombshell, to quote Atheismo or Jeremy Clarkson or whoever coined the phrase, let us sign off and say thank you very much to the panel and say thank you to all the people who have contributed. And I still don't know whether the button on top to click
I don't think it does.
Works.
No, if you click if you click it, what it's supposed to do is launch Skype, asking you to add a friend request.
All right,
That's
so what we need to do is you click on this, it starts Skype, because we cannot interfere with what is happening on a person's computer. So the onus rests then on the person to go and copy-paste the Gin and Tonic show, put it into Skype, and then send it off as a request with a little bit of a title saying what the topic is that you want to talk about, and then the next time this will work beautifully. Thank you, Rashman, for all the work that you've done on this. I think it looks brilliant. All we have to do now is communicate this to the people. With that, thank you very much, and we will see you together with Nadia on the 28th, where we don't need anybody here because Rationalizer is going to whoop his whoopee.
If you look on the bar, you can see a link to our Facebook and a link to our YouTube. So feel free to click there and to subscribe to us on either one. And if you're watching this recorded, feel free to subscribe or to find us on Facebook.
And just to clarify, when he said I'm going to whoop his whoopee, he doesn't actually mean that I'm going to pet his monkey. I'll leave you with a reference for Islamic puberty, tinyurl.com/Islamic puberty. Okay, thanks very much, everyone, and we're off.
Cheers. Bye.